Hello, I'm Reece Bramwell, nutritionist for URest, and welcome to Wellness Wednesdays. As it is January, a lot of people will be reviewing their dietary intake, or maybe even taking part in a campaign like Veganuary. So today I'm going to have a look at the pros and cons of different meat-free or meat-reducing diets, and hopefully giving you some practical tips along the way if you do follow this kind of diet or are looking towards following this kind of diet. So let's start by introducing the three main meat-free or meat-reducing styles of diets that are prominent in the UK today. So starting off with vegan. So the vegan diet contains only plants such as vegetables, grains, nuts and fruit, and food made from plants. So this means the vegan diet of course excludes any animal-derived foods, which of course includes things like dairy products and eggs. Moving on to vegetarian, basically a vegetarian does not contain any meat or fish. Now there are different variations of vegetarian diets, like ovo-vegetarian that includes eggs but excludes dairy products, or lacto-vegetarian which does vice versa, so excludes eggs but includes dairy products. I'm sure most people watching have heard of both of those first two styles of diet and have a pretty good understanding of them. They have been around for a while, and in particular the vegan diet is growing and growing over the last few years. So probably a lesser known term is the flexitarian diet. So this might mean people eat meat once or twice a week, but most of the time they tend to follow a vegetarian style diet. But there's no strict rules on this. So it's hard to put a definition on it, but a flexitarian diet contains increased plant-based meals without eliminating meat completely. So as the name suggests, that one's a little bit more flexible. So let's have a look at the two primary reasons that people reduce meat in their diet to start with. And those are health and environment. So let's look at health first. And if we think about reducing meat, especially processed meats, that often helps to lower saturated fat in our diet. And that's important because high saturated fat in our diet is associated with increased risk of heart disease and certain cancers like bowel cancer. And this could include processed meats like bacon, sausage, salami and ham. And we're actually advised to consume no more than 70 grams of red or processed meat per day. And that, of course, is to try and reduce that fat that naturally occurs there. So then looking at the environment, plant-based food has a considerably lower impact on the environment. Compared to the resources required for plant-based foods, meat has a considerably larger impact on the environment due to use of land, labour involved, and feeding the animals before they reach the plate. This doesn't mean everyone should feel the pressure to give meat up completely, but little steps can make a big difference. For example, one meat-free day can provide a carbon saving equivalent to boiling the kettle 388 times. And I think you'll agree that's quite a surprising statistic, and those little steps we can take will help the environment and make that big difference. But again, we shouldn't feel pressured to reduce meat completely because there are certain nutrients that we'll cover in this presentation that also are very beneficial. So let's look in a bit more detail at the vegan diet. So a recent study by IGD shows that 1 in 6 people in the UK are either following or considering following a vegan diet. More detailed statistics consider that around 2% of the UK population completely follows a vegan diet. So this lends itself to the growing amount of people who are going towards a more plant-based diet. And there are associated benefits with a vegan diet. Lower risk of obesity, lower LDL cholesterol, which is the unhealthier type that we want to try and keep as low as possible, and lower fasting blood sugar levels, which of course helps to avoid things like type 2 diabetes. So it does show a reduced risk of high cholesterol, which has a knock-on reduction on cardiovascular disease and some cancers, largely because of the higher fibre content and lower saturated fat content in a vegan diet. And as you can see, you might be familiar with the traditional Eat Well guide, but now there is actually a vegan Eat Well guide that's available on the Vegan Society website, and this shows how you can still achieve a really balanced diet using vegan products only. But there are key considerations. The vegan diet does have a higher likelihood of some nutrient deficiencies, just because these are naturally things that occur in animal-derived foods more regularly. So nutrients include omega-3s, fatty acids, so they're more available in fish traditionally, vitamin B12, calcium, iron, zinc, selenium and iodine. And this is outlined in that bottom left corner that you can see there of the Eat Well guide. So if you are following a vegan diet, it's important to consider these, analyse your diet if you can, and try to make sure you're getting these nutrients from food sources if possible. So omega-3s, as we've mentioned, are traditionally supplied by oily fish, but they can also be found in walnuts and unsaturated oils like rapeseed oil as well. Also, things like vitamin B12, iodine and selenium, which aren't as commonly found in plant-based ingredients, are outlined in that bottom corner. A lot of these you can get from fortified plant-based milks, which is a really good tip for those following a vegan diet. So look for the fortified plant-based milks and cereals. So these can vary depending on brand, but definitely a good thing to look out for. You'll notice that pink section, and this is normally where meat would sit in the traditional Eat Well guide, but as you can see there are plenty of protein sources to choose from, such as beans, pulses, nuts and seeds, and also alternatives like tofu or soya mince. So it's really good to have a great variety of those and definitely make use of those in your meals, as well as the carbohydrates and the fruit and vegetables, of course, and all the other groups you see there. So let's look at the vegetarian diet now. And the same study by IGD suggests that 1 in 3 UK consumers either follow or are considering following a vegetarian diet in the UK. So this one is much more prominent and I suspect much more familiar to the public because we've been hearing about the vegetarian diet for a very long time now and it's very prominent. And there is actually a vegetarian Eat Well guide available on the Vegetarian Society website too if you wanted to check that out. So let's look at the benefits. So there are more obvious sources of things like calcium, zinc and iodine because eggs and dairy products can be included in the vegetarian diet. So that's a really great benefit of the vegetarian diet. And that helps to fill the void that comes with reduced meat intake. Also provide protein as well. Eggs are a great protein source especially. And again, in some dairy products can provide the protein that we might traditionally get from meat or fish. But also there are a lot of meat alternatives out there in the market nowadays, and I'm sure we're used to seeing these in the supermarkets. So those meat alternatives are usually soya based or pea protein based, so that's generally where the protein comes from. And this is usually people's first steps into reducing meat because they're designed to give a similar taste and texture to meat. The benefit of these is generally they have reduced saturated fat compared to the saturated fat that's naturally found in meat, but it's still worth keeping an eye on packaging just to check the nutritionals. So some key considerations in a vegetarian diet, again omega-3 pops up because we're not consuming oily fish in there. So again, focus on nuts and unsaturated oils like rapeseed oil is a good example. Iron's another one. Again, eggs are a good source of these, green leafy vegetables, but also nuts again. And B12. B12 is a little bit harder to come by sometimes. Look out for your fortified products of B12. Moving on to Flexitarian. So this one is increasing in popularity. Around 55% of UK consumers are actively reducing meat intake. So they may be falling into this Flexitarian category, which is quite a broad category. So the health benefits are largely similar, depending on the extent to which people are reducing meat and the rest of the balance that they have in their diet. But as the name suggests, this one has a lot more flexibility. so you can still consume meat and fish. So when we do consume meat and fish, it's really key to focus on lean meats like your chicken or turkey, or leaner cuts of red meat as well. And when we consume fish, try to make it an oily fish like mackerel or salmon. That means we're getting a good supply of omega-3. Even if we're not looking to reduce our meat and fish intake, that's a good tip to go for leaner versions of meat and oily fish as well. It's important to still aim for 5 a day, and plant-based protein sources really help with that as well. So it's really important to still vary your diet if you are going for a flexitarian diet, and try to get as many different nutrients from as many different food sources, because that will really provide big health benefits. And they also count towards your 5 a day as well. So let's give you some top tips if you are following either a vegan, vegetarian, or just reducing your meat intake. It's still really important to check the packaging, especially if you're going for, you're new to a vegan diet or a vegetarian diet. Just check the packaging so that you get used to seeing whether it is suitable for vegetarians or vegans. And then also you can check the ingredients, and the sort of local produce as well comes into this, and also the nutritionals. So really important to have an awareness of food packaging. If you want to do your bit for the environment, something like buying local and British produce where possible is really good for reducing carbon footprint. Also supports local farmers and British farmers, which is obviously great and means you've got less air miles involved, and eating seasonally really helps with this as well. So try and have an awareness of which fruit and vegetables are in season. This often means that they taste better and have better nutritional value as well, because they've spent less time in transit in usual cases. So also, if you are increasing things like the meat alternatives, be sure to check the nutritionals on those, because they can often still be high in things like salt. So if blood pressure is a problem, for example, you might want to check and get used to your different brands of meat alternatives and just check the nutritionals on there. Another one is be creative with herbs and spices. Just because we're reducing meat doesn't mean we stop seasoning our food. So you still want to put plenty of flavour, and the good thing is plant-based proteins like lentils, chickpeas, beans, pulses are really great at absorbing and soaking up flavour. So that's a brilliant little tip, is still have a nice healthy stock of herbs and spices in your cupboard. Reducing food waste has a huge impact on the environment in general, and all those resources that we spoke about earlier that goes into either growing veg or feeding animals that we end up eating goes to waste completely if the food ends up in the bin. So if we all try to reduce our food waste, we'll have a much better impact on the environment. If you're following a vegan diet or a vegetarian diet, try to identify nutrients that you might struggle to get in your diet, and this is very much an individual thing. Make a conscious effort to try and introduce some food sources or consider a supplement, but check with your GP if you do have any conditions that might affect that. So try to identify some nutrient gaps in your diet, as we should all do. So I wanted to give you some meat-free meal ideas as well. So again, try and be creative with your cooking. Things like aubergine tacos, vegetable and bean chilies. Using ingredients like tofu in stir fries is great. I love a tagine. Tagines are really easy to make, loads of flavour, and you can cook them in a variety of different ways. But really have a good play, and this is just a list to get you started really. So finally, I want to introduce you to our Nourished Life website. So this is all based around nutrition, well-being and sustainability as well. So we post articles on there that are great for a bit of light reading, a bit of research. We keep it nice and simple, but it's all done by experts in the field. And if you want any tips, that's a great place to go. Also features some great recipes, all on the healthier side as well. We've got a great mushroom and tofu pobo here, which is a great sort of stir-fry noodle type dish. And you can include all sorts depending on whatever dietary lifestyle you're going for. If you didn't want tofu, and if you're following the flexitarian diet, you can use chicken or beef in there. You can really play around with those ingredients, and that flexibility is important. Also, check out our article on veganism and try and follow our social media pages as well if you want more regular information. We're regularly putting on healthy articles and recipes on there if that's how you get your health and well-being information. But thank you very much for listening. Bye.